So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
And now, Jimmy Shin from The Account, All Things Comedy from X.
Take, for instance, Tiger Woods. They're always like, he's got the athleticism of an African American, and he's got the intelligence of an Asian. That's why he's so good. That's why he's so good. Well, also about a year ago, he wrecked his car by himself with no other cars on the road and flipped it, which is obviously Asian. I knew you'd laugh at that, you racist. And he had 21 mistresses come forward. 21. You guys remember that? Which is obviously the male race. You guys thought I was going to say something else, you racists.
Good morning. It's Monday, Moral Monday, July the 7th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and moral politics. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. And now from an account called Jazz on YouTube, Old Slow Big Band Jazz. Thank you. And now from various accounts on X, the headlines for Monday, July the 7th. Iran isn't just exporting terror abroad, it's fueling radical ideologies in the U.S., blending anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, and revenge politics. From Congress to New York City, this influence is growing. Trump's big beautiful bill removes taxes on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and shotguns starting January 1st, 2026, a major step toward dismantling the outdated 1934 NFA and a win for liberty, home defense, jobs, and the Second Amendment community. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi terrorists claim credit for yesterday's attack on a commercial ship in the Red Sea. Boeing said it has secured a $2.8 billion U.S. contract to develop and produce 2 satellites with options for 2 more. Texas floods have killed 82 people, including 28 children, 10 Camp Mystic campers, and a counselor still missing, officials say. Former postal carrier gets 5 years for ballot theft during 2024 presidential election scheme after pleading guilty. And those are the headlines for Monday, July the 7th. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the political corner from X.
I want to say thank you, America. Thank you, American people. I'm a Korean immigrant that came to America in 1976 with my mom and dad. Thank you to my mom and dad bring me to America. I started with a paper boy working at the restaurant and saved the money, put that money down payment for the buy dry cleaner. I had a dry cleaner for 20 years, and I sold the shopping plaza, and I retired early 40s. Without being come to America, never made it this kind of dream come true. I want to say happy birthday to America, 249 years old, and I'm still learning English. I still have a thick accent, but it doesn't bother me. This is a learning opportunity for all the immigrants. Thank you, America. Thank you, Americans.
And that was the political corner. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from the account Military Torn on YouTube, the patriotic short.
Why do enemies fear U.S. soldiers? In Iraq, a captured insurgent said, "We fought the army in Ramadi, and it was a hard fight. Then we fought the Marines, and realized we had been fighting the apprentices. The Marines were the masters." French army officer, "I would rather have 4,000 Americans than a whole 40,000 French division. When the chips are down, I'll take an American over anyone else. They're crazy, but they're the best kind of crazy. When they decide they're going to do something, it gets done." A British Special Forces SAS trooper, "To have the United States at our side was to me the greatest joy. I went to bed and slept the sleep of the saved and thankful." Winston Churchill. "To annihilate the 1st Marine Division, we would have to be prepared to suffer losses 2 or 3 times greater than theirs. These Americans were the most skillful and courageous enemy soldiers I have ever fought." A senior Chinese army commander describing the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant." Japanese Admiral Yamamoto.
And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from an account on YouTube called Epic Music Empire, Motivation. And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from Cafe de Anatolia on YouTube, Arabic House. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the daily Stoic.
Set the standards and use them. When the standards have been set, things are tested and weighed. And the work of philosophy is just this, to examine and uphold the standards. But the work of a truly good person is in using those standards when they know them. Epictetus, Discourses, 2.11.23 through 25.
And that was the Daily Stoic. And now, His Excellency, Bishop Robert Barron.
You want to be happy? Be a saint. What does it mean precisely to be a saint? Well, a saint's someone who's holy, okay? What does it mean to be holy? To be holy means to follow the will of God, okay? What's the will of God? Love. God is love. To love is to will the good of the other. Okay, there you got it. To be a saint is someone who habitually wills the good of the other. A saint is someone in whom God is dwelling, in whom the Spirit is alive. Okay, what if you thought of your whole life now under that rubric? My whole life is to be attuned to the path of love, willing the good of the other. What if I woke up every morning and said, that's what I'm going to be about today? Everything else, sure, I'll do all kinds of things, but all of it under the rubric, under the aegis of willing the good of the other. That's what it means to be a saint.
And that was His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, the fundamental evil of government grants is the fact that men are forced to pay for the support of ideas diametrically opposed to their own. This is a profound violation of an individual's integrity and conscience, unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter, The Establishing of an Establishment, from the book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, psychopathy. What makes narcissists terrible people is their obsession with appearing to be good. The manipulation and lies they tell to paint themselves as the victim in all of the circumstances that they themselves created. And that's from the account My Ex is a Psychopath and at Narcissistic Abuse Life Coach on Instagram. Back in a minute. Oh, thank you. And now it's Stuart Varney or Varney and Company, but he's got a substitute.
Just a tick upwards, 0.03% up to 4.37. This 2-year is about flat at 3.88%. Bitcoin is above 108,000 right now. It's up about $260. Oil, let's see what's happening there. It's up as well. Gold is up also. Gold is down. Gold is down significantly, almost a percentage point down, $26 to $3,316. On the show today, Elon Musk launching a new political party. He's calling it the America Party. This after President Trump signed the historic spending bill on Friday, or on July 4th, which is the date he suggested for months he would do it. Well, he did it. And Musk slammed the new law as waste and graft. Trump dismissed Musk's new party suggestion as, quote, ridiculous. But could this turn into shades of Ross Perot's movement, which cost Republicans the White House back in 1992? Investors, meanwhile, are growing uneasy, concerned Musk may be spreading himself too thin. Dan Ives says investors are experiencing exhaustion from Musk's focus on politics, and Tesla pre-market is down. Later today, a high-stakes meeting in Washington. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are on a sit-down. All that and more coming up on this very busy Monday morning, Monday, July 7th, 2025. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And so that was David Asman from Varney and Company. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Jeffrey Mead.
to get canceled for this, but Camp Mystic is a whites-only girls' Christian camp. They don't even have a token Asian. They don't have a token black person. It is a all-white, white-only, conservative Christian camp. If you ain't white, you ain't right, you ain't getting in, you ain't going, period. And I think that context needs to be said in this matter.
No, it doesn't. This is a perfect example of some of the people in our society who obsess over race. They make everything about race. Girls are dying and washed up in a flood, and her first thought is, let's look at the racial demographic of the people who are missing in this camp. It's pathetic. People like this are the people who work and keep racial issues alive. She talks as if this camp only allows white girls, with no proof other than simply pictures. What if it's just simply white people primarily have been the ones that decide to go there? Different cultures do different things. Or maybe there have been multiple races of people there that just aren't in the pictures. I know, it could be a crazy concept. But people with this mentality are the ones who are harming our country. They're not helping anything. And it's pathetic. Again, girls are dying. They've been swept up in a flood. And she's thinking, well, the people behind this, there's a lot of white people there. I'm not seeing much color, so they must be racist. And we need to know the context behind that. Be quiet. No, we don't need your context through your biased racial lens. We don't need that. And we don't want to hear it. These are the type of people who are obsessed with finding racial issues. It's pathetic. We should be focused on what matters, which is finding the people who are missing, not the racial demographic of a camp.
And that was the account from Instagram called The Jeffrey Mead. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an article in the American Thinker called The Rise of Democrat Theater Kids by Brian Jundeff. And I'm going to read this because I'm a independent-leaning Republican, and I want to use this as propaganda to raise the, lower the morale of Democrats while raising the morale of everyone else. So again, the rise of Democrat theater kids. Theater kids, especially those in politics, are described as those who are overly dramatic, prone to theatrical gestures, insincere, and unnecessarily showy. Google's AI highlights several characteristics of theater kids. Performance. Politicians' public personae are like acts on a stage, focusing on presentation and emotion rather than substance or real engagement with their constituents. Cringe factor. In trying to seem reliable, one of the gang, they are come off as inauthentic, forced, awkward, and embarrassing. Lack of authenticity. The term theater kid is a pejorative, suggesting that the politician is insincere and only performing to advance their political agenda or goals. Negative connotation. A genuine theater kid, a child or young adult passionate about acting and exhibiting a dramatic or comedic personality in everyday life, is very different from theater kid politicians who are perceived as insincere drama queens with no credibility. These theatrics are among the reasons why, according to Pew Research, just 26% of those surveyed have a favorable view of Congress, while 72% have an unfavorable view. Let's review some examples, noting that while most political theater kids are on the left, some are on the right, also fall into this category. President Donald Trump and Rep. AOC exchanged insults on X regarding Trump's bombing of Iranian nuclear sites and her call for Trump's impeachment. Let's see, AOC grew up in Yorktown Heights, New York, 35 miles north of the Bronx, where the median sold home price is $721,000, according to Realtor.com. Back in the day, she was known as Sandy Cortez. Now she calls herself Sandy from the block. But the block isn't in the Bronx. It's an affluent Westchester County. This kind of act lines up with staged photos of her crying next to a fence near an ICE detention center. As a side note, why do far-left politicians change their childhood names when they start their political careers? How many well-known actors and actresses use stage names different from their birth names? Barack Obama was known as Barry Soetoro during his childhood, but chose a more exotic name when he recognized it would help his political career. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio was born Warren Willem Jr. and changed his name as an adult. The socialist communist theater kids include Hillary Clinton. In 2007, while campaigning for her first failed presidential bid, she spoke to a black church congregation in Selma, Alabama. Pandering to the South black audience, she theatrically adopted a Southern drawl, saying, "I don't feel no ways tired," in a cringeworthy manner. Hillary from the hood. Rep. Eric Swalwell, best known for sleeping with a Chinese spy, was in tears over a Trump meme, an AI-generated image of Trump holding a duck and a cat, mocking Trump's campaign claim that Haitian migrants were eating pets in Ohio. Senator Cory Spartacus Booker is another emerging actor. During Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court justice confirmation hearings, Booker pushed for the release of classified documents and dramatically stated, quote, "This is the closest I'll ever get to an I am Spartacus moment," unquote, channeling Kirk Douglas in the 1960 Oscar-winning film. Senator Alex Padilla, without revealing his identity to event organizers or security officials, dramatically interrupted Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's Los Angeles press conference. As expected, he received the FAFO response, was escorted out, and got himself handcuffed. Secretary Noem's account states, "This man burst into the room, started lunging toward the podium, interrupting me and elevating his voice, and was stopped. Did not identify himself, and was removed from the room." Like many talented actors who enjoy encores, Padilla shifted from Rambo to Alan Alda, delivering a tearful soliloquy in the U.S. Senate chamber worthy of an Oscar. It's unfortunate that he doesn't display tears or outrage over the dire situation in the state he represents, California. Senator Cory Booker followed Padilla and took to the Senate podium outraged over the treatment of this son of Mexican immigrants, from Spartacus to Atticus Finch. The media chorus then joined in and, across all cable news platforms, defended the, quote, mild-mannered, unquote, Padilla, who disrupted a cabinet secretary's press conference like a madman. Across the fertile plains of New York City mayoral candidate Brad Lander was detained by ICE agents for assaulting law enforcement impeding a federal officer, all part of a highly theatrical display for the TV cameras. On cue, supporting actress New York Governor Kathy Hochul held a press conference to voice her faux outrage, which was hardly noticeable in her Botoxed face. Channeling another theatrical kid, Greta Thunberg, Hochul borrowed Greta's catchphrase, "How dare they?" and called the arrest bullshit. One of AOC's fellow House actors, Rep. Jimmy Gomez, was conveniently photographed on the Capitol steps shedding tears after the passage of the big, beautiful bill. Is he crying because he's losing the votes of deported illegal immigrants who helped him win his congressional seat? Or is he mourning the third world conditions of the state he represents? Pure theater. It's not just elected officials. One particular U.S. Supreme Court justice actually appeared in a theater production, as the New York Post reported. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson debuts in queer Broadway musical knockoff of Romeo and Juliet. Of course she did. This is the justice that failed to define what a woman is during her confirmation hearings. During her theatrical performance, she portrayed Queen Mab, a pronounced she-he character. Her court opinions also seem overly theatrical. In recent Supreme Court decisions on birthright citizenship, one of her colleagues criticized her dramatics, saying, quote, "We observe only that Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary," unquote, wrote Justice Amy Coney Barrett. There were also theater kids sitting across the aisle. GOP Rep. Nancy Mace visited the Waffle House and went to the Capitol wearing pajamas to support the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Did her stunt win GOP votes or influence public opinion? Doubtful. The bill barely passed in the House. Finally, there's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' dramatic soliloquy, setting a House record for the longest speech at 9 hours. His filibuster didn't sway any votes, as Democrats are monolithically opposed to any and all Republican bills. While the media praised him for taking his sweet time, wasting everyone else's time, they overlooked one of the Jeffries' past performances. In 2021 on MSNBC, Jeffries called the filibuster a racist artifact of the Jim Crow era and complained that the filibuster was allowing people to stand in the way of progress. Hakeem from the block, he was against what he's now for. So much for his block. Congress is like theater, not grand like Gone with the Wind or Shakespeare, but more like the Three Stooges or Rodney Dangerfield. No wonder they're held in such low esteem. Unfortunately, the media doesn't call us out. Instead, it offers canned laughter and applause reminiscent of a 1970s sitcom. As America approaches her 250th birthday, we are unfortunately not governed by statesmen and scholars, but instead by a group of theater kid buffoons. And that was an article in the American Thinker called The Rise of Democrat Theater Kids by Brian Jundep, MD. He's a physician and writer. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, what does the phrase, "if you're explaining you're losing," mean in debates? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, when you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Maria Bartiromo. It's a substitute. I don't know what her name is, and I really don't care. But she's going to be interviewing a Texas sheriff, and it's about the floods that happened over the weekend. But I want you to notice her technique.
Those rescues happening by air. The state is now bracing for more flooding, with heavy rain expected again today. President Trump says he will likely visit this area Friday. Joining me now is Terrell County, Texas Sheriff and retired Border Patrol agent, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland. Sheriff, good morning, sir. And I know your county wasn't directly impacted by this flood, but certainly the flooding in general is about to affect Texas again today.
Hey, good morning, Cheryl. Great to be on with you. No, and you're exactly right. And I must say, first and foremost, our prayers go out with those that are affected by the floods down in Kerrville. And, Texas, it has a robust response when it comes to incident management and emergency response due to the Texas Division of Emergency Management. My wife's actually an employee of that that division, and she's out here in Region 7 and hasn't been deployed just because of some of the flooding we've had in our own region up in San Angelo. Actually, the Rio Grande River south of us is up about 16 feet. And then again, our community is no stranger to flooding either. June 11th, we had the 60th anniversary of a flood that killed 26 people here in Terrell County back in 1965. And, it's something that's still on people's memories to this day.
Well, certainly we're going to be thinking about the people in Texas again this morning as the.
So I wanted you to notice right there that because there's good faith interviewing is when you start from a position of ignorance. You don't know the person that you're interviewing. You don't know the details of whatever it is that the reason that you're interviewing. In this particular case, with a flood, but she doesn't do that. She starts out with a statement, and she doesn't even ask a question. She just makes a statement and then pauses to let him confirm what it is she's already suspects or what she already knows. It's more of an interrogation than anything else. There's different types of interviews. There's an interview by a journalist, which is supposed to be to gather information. Then you have interviews that are designed, that are goal-oriented, such as that with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or an interrogator, a police officer or other individual, a lawyer, for instance, doing a deposition, who's doing an interrogation. What he should have done in this particular situation to get things back on track, she started with a presumption. She presumes to know what it is that's going on the ground in Texas, even though she's thousands of miles away in New York. And what he should have done was challenge her assumption and say something to the effect of, I don't know where you got your information, but that's incorrect. Perhaps you should double check your sources to get the information right and leave it at that. Then she's in a position where she's going to have to do things in good faith and ask him, okay, well, what is going on the ground in Texas? Now we've got things back on track to have a good faith interview. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from a book that's called Good Inside. What's the opposite of understanding? For this argument's sake, it's convincing. Convincing is the attempt to prove a singular reality, to prove that only one thing is true. Convincing is an attempt to be right, and as a result make the other person wrong. It rests on the assumption that there's only one correct viewpoint. And then my question is this supposed to be convincing? Further, convincing has one goal in mind, being right. And here's the unfortunate consequence of being right. The other person feels unseen and unheard, at which point most people become infuriated and combative, because it feels as if the other person does not accept your realness or worth. Feeling unseen and unheard makes connection impossible. Understanding two things are true and convincing one thing is true are diametrically opposed ways of approaching other people, so a powerful first step in any interaction is to notice which mode you're in. When you're in one thing is true mode, you're judgmental of and reactive to someone else's experience because it feels like an assault on your own truth. As a result, you will seek to prove your own point of view, which in turn makes the other person defensive because they need to uphold the realness of their experience. In one thing is true mode, exchanges escalate quickly. Each person thinks they're arguing about the content of the conversation when in fact they're trying to defend that they are a real, worthy person with a real, truthful experience. And again, is this convincing? Back in a minute. Thank you again, Maria. And from today, July the 7th. And the substitute host is now going to introduce another person who's going to be commenting on a story about Americans' feelings on AI.
This is Madison Allworth is here with more. Madison, good morning.
Good morning, Cheryl. So many Americans use AI at least on a monthly basis, but more are worried about the impact of this revolutionary technology. Brand new Fox polling shows that 43% of Americans think AI is a good thing. That's up from roughly 2 years ago. But even more Americans, 47%, nearly half, think it's a bad thing. While we're slightly less afraid of AI, more people say we cannot trust it and adoption is a bad idea. That could be in part because business leaders like Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, said last week at the Aspen Ideas Festival, quote, artificial intelligence is going to replace literally half of all white-collar workers in the U.S.
Okay, so this is again the fallacy, the polling survey fallacy that they like to use. It's just a flat-out lie. First of all, she doesn't bother to say who did the poll or the survey. She doesn't bother to say how many people it is that were polled or surveyed. And you can bet that it wasn't all Americans, 360 million people. More than likely, it was in the neighborhood of 2,000 folks. That's what they usually do. So right away, she's being deceptive. And she's lying by telling you that 43% of Americans support this. What she should have said, if she wanted to be honest, credible, and maintain her integrity, would be to say the truth, which is 43% of those surveyed say this or that or the other thing. That's the proper way to represent a poll or a survey. Back in a minute. Thank you. A little bit more of Maria, and she's got a panel with her, and they're going to talk about AI a little bit.
Allworth, thank you for that. And you know what, Liz Peek, as far as the state issue, I looked into this, and at first I thought, why was it in the bill in the first place? But the truth is, if you have individual states start to clamp down on AI, you're going to clamp down on AI, and the Chinese are going to win, and that's the truth.
That's the concern everybody has, right? I think it's wonderful that 62% of the country doesn't think the government can regulate this, because they're totally right. I don't think we have the expertise. It's a very fast evolving technology. But by the way, also, it is completely correct that so many people are distrustful and worried about it. We have seen increasing stories about robots going rogue, refusing to be shut down, even though their engineers are trying to shut them down, cloning themselves on the internet. There's some pretty weird stuff happening with this. Is it productive, enhancing? Yes, but I want to just say one thing. Sam Altman was being interviewed by a friend of mine who said to him, who is the head of ChatGPT, who asked him, what is name a job category that we could lose because of AI? Thinking it would be paralegals or analysts on Wall Street. Construction worker. And he was taken aback. How could that be? Because Sam Altman says that within 2 or 3 years, robots in combination with AI will be building faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than humans. That makes this a game changer.
Very Zuckelman.
And scary.
Okay, so she introduced Liz Peek. Liz Peek is, she wrote a column a couple of years ago in the Wall Street Journal, and in which she advised then candidate Donald Trump to drop out of the race. This was during the primaries. And she advised him to drop out of the race and said that he would be a national hero if he dropped out of the race, because he would be doing the whole country so much good. And, of course, he ends up running and winning. Now, the problem is that Miss Peek doesn't come back later and say, guess what? I was wrong. I messed up. I shouldn't have written that article. She did nothing to admit that she was wrong or to make amends in any way, shape, or form. She just all of a sudden flips over and starts acting as though she's a Trump supporter and been a Trump supporter all along. So she has no integrity, no credibility, and I take what she says with a grain of salt. For instance, in her little thing here, her little commentary about AI, she said that made this specious claim that there were robots going rogue, that they refused to be shut down, even though they're whoever it is that created them are shutting them down. She doesn't cite a source for this. She demands that we take her word for it. But since she has no credibility and no integrity, why would I bother to take her word for anything? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from Audible, Moral Politics by George Lakoff.
Part 3. From Family-Based Morality to Politics. Chapter 7. Why we need a new understanding of American politics. The failure of liberals to comprehend conservatism. We are a few steps away from our denouement, from showing in detail how such an analysis of family-based moral systems contributes to an answer of the puzzles we started with, and sheds light on why conservatives and liberals have the political policies they have. But first, it would be useful to show why such an account is needed. Existing attempts by liberals to understand conservative politics have failed. We will begin with 3 analytic failures by liberals. 1. Conservatism is the ethos of selfishness. 2. Conservatives just believe in less government. 3. Conservatism is no more than a conspiracy of the ultra-rich to protect their money and power and to make themselves even richer and more powerful. The selfishness hypothesis. Let us begin with the mistake of Michael Lerner of Tikkun magazine, whose Politics of Meaning has been endorsed by Hillary Rodham Clinton. Lerner, Tikkun, December 1994, pages 12 through 18. Gets some things right. He correctly perceives progressive liberal politics as being centered on nurturance and community, what he calls the ethos of caring. But he is quite mistaken when he dismisses conservative politics as being no more than the ethos of selfishness. He has missed the conservative moral vision and missed the fact that American voters appear to be responding to that moral vision. If Lerner were right, simple pragmatic appeals to self-interest should work on conservatives. They don't. If he were right, conservatives in California would have endorsed the single-payer initiative, since it would have saved them money. If he were right, conservatives would not be endorsing the replacement of AFDC welfare payments with orphanages, since orphanages cost more than AFDC does. If he were right, conservatives would not be endorsing the 3 strikes legislation and all the money to be spent on prisons that it entails. Simply pointing out to conservatives that these policies do not serve their selfish interests should end the matter right there. It has been pointed out, to no effect. Lerner's ethos of selfishness hypothesis does not explain the moral fervor of the conservative majority as it took over Congress at the beginning of 1995. It does not explain the focus on family values. It doesn't even explain why the conservatives advocate the death penalty, or why they want to abolish the NEA, or why they oppose abortion. The selfishness hypothesis simply does not explain conservative policies. The less government hypothesis. Why does conservative politics take the shape it does? Why should conservatives be proposing orphanages, abolishing the Environmental Protection Agency, abolishing the arts and humanities endowments? Is it merely, as is repeated over and over, that conservatives want less government and liberals want more? That cannot be true. Conservatives don't merely want less government. They want to raise spending for the military, even bring back Star Wars, not reduce it. They want to build more prisons. There is no move to eliminate the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the FBI, or the intelligence agencies. There is no outcry to stop bailouts of large corporations, like Lockheed, or eliminate nuclear power development, or to stop funding computer research. There is no attempt to charge airlines for the training of pilots by the Air Force, or to charge automobile companies for the building of highways. If conservatives simply wanted less government spending or wanted government to pay for itself, there are a myriad of other cuts and reforms they could be proposing. The less government hypothesis is simply false. It does not explain what conservatives do and don't want to spend money on. Conservatives want to spend on some things and not others. What determines which ones? The cynical liberal response. Anthony Lewis, New York Times op-ed page, February 27, 1995, lists the following conservative budget cuts: repeal of the National School Lunch Act, ending the WIC, Women, Infants, and Children program that has reduced infant mortality by providing nutrition to impoverished mothers and children, and legislation making it harder for investors to sue in case of securities fraud. He comments, "Looking at that list of actions taken and planned, one can hardly miss the theme. The purpose of one measure after another is to enrich those who have money and power in our society and reduce the modest help this country gives to the poor and the weak. Manufacturers and drug companies would gain. Sick children and poor mothers would lose." This is an example of the cynical liberal response to conservative government. The cynical liberal response is that conservative politicians are all tools of the ultra-rich and the big multinational corporations the rich control. Under the Reagan and Bush administrations, there was a massive redistribution of wealth toward the ultra-rich, so that now the top 10% of families control 70% of the nation's wealth. The Reagan administration added $3 trillion to the national debt and redistributed it to the ultra-rich, making the rest of the country pay interest on the debt, which amounts to 28% of the federal budget every year. The cynical liberal response is that conservatives want to continue spending on 1. The means of social control, such as the military, the police, the intelligence services, the prisons, and on. 2. Aspects of government that help make the rich richer, say the funding of computer research or nuclear power, or the Air Force's training of pilots which benefits the airlines, or the bailouts of large corporations. The cynical liberal response is that the ultra-rich are attempting to take over the intellectual life of the country to ensure their domination. One step has been to finance a network of right-wing think tanks. Eliminating the National Endowment for the Humanities would eliminate a major source of funding for non-right-wing research. Eliminating the Corporation for Public Broadcasting would curtail public discourse in a way that would serve thought control. Controlling the purse strings of public universities would be another step in thought control. Setting the agenda for moral education would be still another. There is much to be said for the cynical liberal response. Much of it is true. Yet it has major flaws and is far from the whole story. First, it is a demonization of conservatives. It assumes that they are either rich, evil, self-serving power mongers, or they're paid agents or dupes. The conservative ranks may well contain some of each. Yet most conservatives are not rich and see themselves as working for the benefit of the country rather than for their own benefit. There are too many idealistic conservatives of good intentions and moderate means for the demonization theory to be true. Second, the conspiracy theory attributes too much to competence and to centralized control. Political life in America is not run from the top by a smooth functioning machine. It is messy. American politics is not something that yields readily to rational control. A well-financed, smooth-functioning machine can do a lot in political organization and propaganda, but it cannot implant a totally different worldview in tens of millions of minds. It must use ideas that are already there and well-respected in the culture. Third, the conspiracy theory does not explain why conservative rhetoric can make sense to so many people who did not previously vote conservative. It does not explain why such people simply did not experience cognitive dissonance and disbelief when they heard the campaign rhetoric. The cynical liberal explanation is the Orwellian one, that any big lie repeated often enough will be believed. But that assumes an old-fashioned stimulus-response view of the human mind that both ignores what is known about the human brain and ignores the effects of culture. We are all immersed in American culture. Our cultural knowledge is physically encoded in the synapses of our brains. People do not get new worldviews overnight. New ideas are never entirely new. They must make use of ideas already present in the culture. No conspiracy of the ultra-rich explains why conservative ideas make sense to people and what sense they make. Fourth, the conspiracy theory does not explain the details of conservative political positions. Why should the death penalty be in the interest of the ultra-rich? How can the rich get richer on the 3 strikes and you're out law, which requires heavy government spending on prisons? How would orphanages serve the interests of the ultra-rich? Why should the ultra-rich want to get rid of the National Endowment for the Arts? The conspiracy theory simply doesn't explain many important conservative policies. Moreover, even where the ultra-rich do benefit from conservative policies, a deeper explanation is in order. Why should conservative morality serve ultra-rich interests? What links are there between conservative family values and the interests of the ultra-rich? Simply positing a conspiracy of the ultra-rich does not answer these questions. In short, I do not believe the cynical liberal claim that the details of conservative political policies are just due to a self-serving ultra-rich conspiracy, though the interests and finances of the ultra-rich are certainly engaged. Indeed, I have not heard any liberal account of conservatism that makes sense of conservative policies, or the conservative worldview, or conservative language. I think there is a deeper explanation that comes out of the cultural role of the strict father model of the family, and the moral schemes that fit that model. The conservative failure to understand conservatism. Even the views of conservative thinkers don't really help in characterizing what conservatism is. There are 3 principal conservative descriptions of conservatism. 1. Conservatism is against big government. 2. Conservatism is for traditional values. 3. Conservatism is just what the Bible tells us. We have already seen that the first is false. As for the second, take what William J. Bennett, one of the major conservative intellectuals, says. Conservatism, as I understand it, seeks to conserve the best elements of the past. It understands the important role that traditions, institutions, habits, and authority have in our social life together, and recognizes our national institutions as products of principles developed over time by custom, the lessons of experience, and consensus. Conservatism, too, is based on the belief that the social order rests upon a moral base. References, C1, Bennett, 1992, page 35. Bennett's account doesn't help much. It doesn't say what is to count as the best elements of the past and why. Racism, colonialism, witch-burning, child labor, and even the sale of children as indentured servants are not among the best elements of American tradition. But it is not clear by what criterion something is to count as best. Bennett mentions traditional institutions, but government and public schools are not traditional institutions that count for conservatives. He mentions consensus, but conservatives support views where there is no consensus. Anti-abortion legislation, the abolishment of social programs, and so on. He mentions a moral base, but gives no general account of why conservative views of morality are to count as moral, while liberal views of morality are not to count as moral. The same problem inheres in the claim of right-wing religious groups who state that conservatism is just a matter of following the Bible. The Bible cannot be applied to politics or much else without a lot of selection and interpretation. The National Council of Churches also urges following the Bible, but gives it a liberal interpretation. Libertarian theology also follows the Bible, with an often revolutionary interpretation. What exactly characterizes a conservative interpretation of the Bible? Until this prior question is answered adequately, it will be hard to understand just which Christians see their religion as fitting conservative politics and why. We will discuss this in Chapter 14. What all this suggests is that conservatives themselves are not particularly good at characterizing what unifies their own political philosophy. Nor does it appear that liberals are any better at characterizing political liberalism. Theoreticians of liberalism see their job as normative, not descriptive, as saying what liberalism should be, rather than describing what it actually is. Not surprisingly, the normative theoretical characterizations of liberalism do not do a very good descriptive job. Thomas Spraggins, Jr. provides a typical view. The essence of liberalism as a normative doctrine is its focus on the protection of rights as the central, perhaps the only, purpose of political society. Its essence as a social theory is to focus on autonomous and separate individuals as the sum and substance of society. A properly ordered society, therefore, is centered around contractual relationships among these individuals. References C4. Spraggins, 1995. This does not in any way distinguish between contemporary liberals and conservatives. The question to be asked is, which rights count? Conservatives declare the right to keep what you've earned, the right to own machine guns, the rights of the unborn, the right to do anything you want with your property, the right to form a private, heavily armed militia, and so on. If it is liberals who fear the coercive power of the state, why is it that conservatives are trying to destroy federal power and liberals are trying to preserve it? Without an account of what rights count and what coercive powers of the state are bad, the classical theory of liberalism cannot distinguish political liberalism from conservatism. Other classic liberal theories focus upon liberty and equality jointly. Rawls, for example, adds to liberty an account of equality in which any inequalities must benefit the most disadvantaged members of society. This tells us nothing about why political liberals favor ecology, why they are not anti-abortion, why they defend funding for the arts, and so on. From the abstract realms of liberty and equality, you can't get down to the nitty-gritty of real political stands on issues. The communitarian critiques, on the whole, don't do much better than the classical liberal views. They correctly point out that the classical liberal myth of the autonomous individual entering into social contracts with other autonomous individuals doesn't make much sense. Individuals are not and never were autonomous. We are social through and through, and social life necessarily demands responsibilities as well as rights. But which responsibilities and why? Conservatives also stress responsibility. What's the difference? Another common claim has to do with the liberal and conservative views of human nature. Conservatives think that people are basically rotten and have to be subject to authority and disciplined, while liberals think that people are basically good and can decide what to do for themselves. That theory just doesn't jibe at all with contemporary liberal and conservative politics. Liberals don't think that people out to maximize their profit can be counted on to do the right thing, not to pollute, not to create unsafe working conditions, not to make unsafe products, not to discriminate unfairly. It's the liberals who are suspicious of human nature on many issues, and the conservatives who are trusting. Michael Lerner, as noted above, is on the right track when he talks about the ethos of caring as being central to liberalism. But he does not spell out just what the details of that ethos are and why it leads to the particular stands that liberals tend to hold. Moreover, conservatives, too, care about many things. The morals of their children, the rights of the unborn, what is taught in our schools, the victims of crimes, the effects of our society on sex, drugs, and violence. How does the caring of conservatives differ from the caring of liberals? It is not caring alone that makes the difference. I believe that the answer, or at least a part of it, has to do with strict father and nurturant parent morality. I will argue that these opposed moral visions lie behind the worldview differences between conservatives and liberals. I will also argue that variations on these moral systems can explain the rich variety of positions within each camp. The remaining step in the argument remains to be taken. What links the family and family-based morality to politics?
And that was Chapter 7 of Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think, by George Lakoff, Ph.D., and it's an excellent book. Most of his books are excellent because they explain how liberals think, and it's all about framing, how you frame an argument. So it's a handbook on sophistry is really what it comes down to. So that was Chapter 7. Next week, Chapter 8. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.